Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Not Just Politics podcast. Today is Friday, October 25th. We are in the studio today with a special guest, a senior political science major and president of the BridgeUSA chapter at the University of Pittsburgh, Alex Weaver. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Of course, it's good to have you here. We've been planning this for a while, and we just finally made it happen. It's good to have you here. Can you give the people a brief introduction of yourself and what you're all about?
Yeah, so my name is Alex Weaver. I'm a senior at the University of Pittsburgh. I am studying political science. I'm also minoring in Hindi, sociology, and LCJS, which is like a law minor. I am pre-law, technically. I took my LSAT over the summer, so I'm set to go to law school in the future if that's something I want to do. But for right now, I'm working actually with the BridgeUSA national team as well.
Really?
As of recently. I don't know if I mentioned that to you. I got a part-time position,
Nice.
so I'm
What
starting
are you
that. I haven't gotten too much information on what exactly my role is.
Okay.
But apparently they said they're quite busy right now, so I guess I'll have
Yeah.
my hands full, which is exciting. So
Awesome. That's really cool.
so yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to right now.
All right.
That's me.
And how did you get involved with BridgeUSA?
Yeah, so I it was back in my freshman year. I didn't really know much about Bridge at all before I came to Pitt, and it was actually at the activity fair during my freshman year that I saw the table. And at the time, the Bridge Pittsburgh chapter was just one person. It was Jack Rotolo, who now works for the national team. But I remember going into that, I always found myself interested in politics. But something what I really enjoyed was I would go online on YouTube and stuff like that, and I'd watch tons of YouTube videos from random creators or whoever. And I'd go through all the comments and read what do people have to say about this? I loved watching debate style videos like that, just especially back during COVID, especially, I had so much time to spare. I was this is what I love doing. This is what I'm going to spend my time doing. So I ended up just getting pretty into politics in that way, but more in the sense of wanting to hear from and learn from and just I guess expand my perspective of a lot of different political issues just by listening to a ton of different people. And so what I wanted when I went to when I came to college is that I wanted to find somewhere where I could expand on that. Obviously, university is a great opportunity to really engage with new people. Universities are filled with people who come from all over the country and all over the world. So, this is the time where I'm okay, I need to find a club or organization that, will allow me to do more of this. And, Bridge was exactly that. I came to the table because I saw Jack there. I didn't know at the time, but, the table seemed interesting because I was oh, this is a political club, but seems to be centered around political discussion. And I was, hey, what's Bridge all about? And he was oh, we're a nonpartisan organization dedicated to creating spaces for civil and productive dialogue. And I'm it's kind of what I'm looking for, And so immediately, off the hook, I was interested in that. And so I remember, I got involved freshman year. We were really rebuilding the whole board at the time because I think prior to that, most of the board graduated. So it was just Jack at the time. And so I joined on the board. I was the events person, and kind of unofficially Jack's number 2 guy. So I did that for my freshman year. It was really successful. And then since then, I've just, we get into it later, but I just got more and more involved with Bridge, hosting other larger events and more discussion meetings. And it's just been super, super successful and definitely a great experience that I'm really, really grateful to have had.
Mm. What do you think? What do you think the overall feeling at the University of Pittsburgh has been with this election coming up and with all of the tension on campus that we've been seeing from the Israel and the conflict in the Middle East? What do you think the changes have been? Have you felt because it's a very big school? I imagine it's tough to stay tapped into a large. I think at Point Park it's easier because it's only 2,000 people,
Yeah.
So it's much easier to kind of gauge the sentiment of the school. I imagine it's much tougher at Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of stuff have you guys been paying attention to over there?
Well, I mean, I will say it's pretty great to see, just from my perspective, how politically active Pitt's campus is. There's a lot of students there who are really passionate about various issues, including the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, and so it's something where I actually see that a lot. There's a lot of students who really are out protesting, out making their voice heard, trying to make a difference. I'll see, usually it's a lot of protests that happen near the Cathedral of Learning, or on the streets, or there'll be like, I'll even see like bake sales and stuff like that. They're trying to raise money. There's a lot of passion for that issue. And it's something that, like I said, I enjoy seeing, because I love seeing, especially young people like active and wanting to make a change. And so this is a little bit separate, but I also often find it like I don't love the way that a lot of people will often like kind of attack young, like college-aged people who are trying to like protest or whatever. Often they're called like naive, or they're like, kind of like talked down upon, because they're too young to really know what they're talking about. But I mean, I see all the passion and the amount of effort people put in to make a difference, and it's inspiring to me. It's something I really really love to see. And often a lot of it has been directed almost at the university. I guess it was maybe about a year and a half ago. I think Pitt had put out a statement in which they were sort of kind of unofficially sort of standing with Israel. And a lot of students had taken issue with that. And so a lot of what the protests have been about is not only about creating awareness, but also protesting against the university itself and trying to get the university, I mean, this is to my knowledge, but get the university to put another statement out, maybe contradicting what they had said before, or, expanding upon what they had said before, because they also were very vague about it. So I don't think a lot of students like really appreciated that. And obviously the university is going to be very vague about it, because they won't want to be too like overtly, I'll say, political in that sense. But students want to make a change, and they want to get the university to sort of do something about it. So what I'm seeing is just a lot of passion on my campus. And again, it's something that I love to see, in the sense that it's great to see that people really care about it and are trying to do something. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah. What do you think about institutional neutrality? Do you think it's a good thing for colleges and universities to make, not vague is not the word I'm looking for, but to make, I guess neutral is the word, make neutral statements about issues that are happening in society?
So I will say, I almost feel like in a way it's not in my place to say if the university should make a certain kind of statement, just as like, because obviously I have my own beliefs of what, I, of course, like in the perfect world would love other people to also believe, because like that's just, how I see the world should be. But I don't know if I don't know if I'd make the argument that the university should or shouldn't do something. I really don't know what the proper, just speaking, from what I want, like I don't know what the proper course of action for the university would be. I will say I definitely think there is an importance, I'd say in a general sense, to sort of like some neutrality, if I pronounce that correctly. Just because I think it's important for universities especially to be a place where people can discuss ideas in like a productive, thoughtful, educational manner, and have. I mean, that's why I'm part of BridgeUSA. I want people to more people to have that kind of discourse about these issues, and so I want it to be a place where people can learn from each other. And so if the university is like shutting down, certain, like for instance, like they have often sort of I don't know all the details, but from what I've seen, they've generally shut down or pushed back against a lot of the protests supporting Palestine, and it's something where I see that, and I feel like it's the university's response is not the right kind of response, in the sense that I think that they should be doing a better job of trying to uplift the voices of all the students on campus and make it a place where people can feel heard. Because the reason people are protesting is because they don't feel heard in what they care about, so they're trying to make their voice heard. And so I think the university should play a bigger role in, I'll say, while being neutral, like being not just like step back from it and not be a part of it, but to actually play an active role in trying to get students' voices to be heard, and trying to make actual change from that. rather than the approach of just standing back. I think it's I'm speaking very broadly about the general what I would personally say a university should do in those circumstances. I think I would definitely say though that there are instances in which it is like the university shouldn't be neutral when that neutrality can cause like students to be harmed on campus, or students to be put in any kind of danger. So I think they also, as while they do have a role of being neutral, they have a role of protecting students and making it a safe place for students because they're paying a lot of money to attend this university. They shouldn't feel like they are targets at the university. So that's part of the university playing an active role, making it a space where people can freely express their voices and not be worried about the university trying to shut them down. But also like there is a limit to that in the sense that people are expressing voices that are just directly inciting harm or violence or hate, then obviously that's a little bit different. And obviously it would be sort of an example by example thing, but like the university should treat that a little bit differently. But I would say, I mean, you could phrase it as they should be neutral, but neutral in the sense of uplifting voices, and allowing students to be able to talk about these issues and allow their voices to be heard.
Do you think that? So it seems like I've been to some of those protests at Pitt. I went to some of the ones last year, and the one thing that I've noticed here at Point Park, and I've noticed just in general, is that it doesn't necessarily seem like the people at those protests are talking to anybody, in the sense that they're kind of just they're talking past the people that they disagree with. I think it's one big thing like that's got talked about in the bridging movement is like people aren't talking to each other, they're talking past each other, and then it's a lot harder to actually solve problems. So do you think that do you think it would be beneficial in any way to change the format of those protests, or even I'm thinking now, like even if the university almost like sponsored a space for, I mean, I'm just doing BridgeUSA with extra steps. That is essentially what I'm doing. But my thought is just like getting those students, because I think students should be able to protest. I support their right to protest, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know what those protests accomplish. Just in the sense that, yes, I agree with you. It's like people don't feel like they have a voice, so they're just trying to get the message out any way they can. I understand that. It just feels like there's got to be a better way to do it.
I mean, so what I would say to that is I do agree, because you mentioned something about the university, like how the university should be more involved in creating a space for that specifically and trying to promote that. I absolutely agree with that. What I will say about the protests that are going on currently is I think they do play an important role on our campus, just about even creating awareness about the conflict. I mean, I do my best to try to keep up to date on, just world news and foreign conflicts. But the protests are a reminder. Like it's not something that's going to slip my mind. I see it every day. I'll see some sort of protest, or if it's a fundraiser, whatever it is, that's talking about the conflict ongoing. And so it's something where I think they hold the purpose of reminding students about what's going on, so they don't forget about what's going on, because it's a conflict that's happening very far away. It's easy for a lot of students to just they don't see it in their daily life, so they don't really think about it maybe. So that sort of reminds people what's going on. And I've talked to like classmates about this, and they sort of had like a similar belief that like just seeing the protests happening is like it serves as a reminder of how this is still something that's going on. It's still something that people should be talking about. And it's something too where even a lot of the protests, like the university has to recognize that the protests are happening often, because they'll usually send out like a Pitt ENS alert to our phones and saying like, oh, like be aware that there's a protest happening on blah, blah, blah street. There's like police presence, whatever it is. So it's almost like the university is then put in a position where they have to acknowledge it, which also does something, because now it's not like, even if you don't see the protest, that's happening because you got a text on your phone saying there is a protest going on. Mm-hmm. You might look it up, what's going on, so I think that's something where those protests do still have a purpose. Even, I mean, I again, like I'm not totally familiar or have full knowledge on, who I guess the protests are always directed at, or I guess what exactly maybe like the goals that are in mind might be of the people who are trying to lead or who are leading the protests. But I think they do, as they are, still serve a purpose of creating awareness, even if they don't change things institutionally. Which I'm saying they won't, but I just don't know exactly the effect that they're having in that sense. But I do also agree that combined with the protests that are ongoing, I think creating spaces, or the university playing an active role in creating spaces for people to talk about these issues is incredibly important, because a big part of this conflict is that people are not aware of what's going on, and people have different perceptions of what's going on. And so creating a space where people can share their stories, experiences, or those of others, and bring light to what's going on, I think is like so important, because I think, this just goes with my sort of, I could say, my general principles of, I think that people know a lot less about the world around them than they think they do. Yeah. People know their own experiences. They know what has led them to believe what they believe. But, I only know what it's like to experience life in my body with my experience. I don't know, even people who I may share similar characteristics with, like, I don't know what they've experienced. I don't know how their experiences have shaped them. And surely someone who, lives somewhere else in the world is going to have a very different experience from me. And so, I do my best in my everyday life to try to be mindful of that, and try not to speak for, or speak of other people in their experiences because I don't really know what those experiences are like. And I never really will. So I always do my best to, how I approach talking to other people about their experiences, as I use it as an opportunity to learn, and to expand my way of thinking. And like, even if I then get a better, more broad understanding of what other people's experiences may be, which is like always helpful and educational. It's something I hold with importance to me. I'll never let that like understanding that I've gained like make it so I'm not still trying to understand more, or I want it cause me to assume that I know, because I still don't really know what it's like. Yeah. So I think that creating spaces where people can talk about what's going on in a way where they can share those experiences, and creating spaces where people are there to understand and there to learn, is incredibly crucial.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I like the point you made that you look at it as something educational. That's really what it should be. I don't know exactly what's happened. It doesn't feel like people approach it like that anymore. Like it's an educational thing. And I understand it's not always fun. Sometimes you're in a conversation and you hear something that does challenge your worldview, or it makes you think about something, and that can be a little bit of a jarring experience. It can cause you to rethink a lot of things. It's not always fun, but I agree with you. Like, it should be viewed as something that's educational, because you do get smarter after being in those conversations. What advice do you have for people that want to have those difficult conversations, and especially anyone that's in a position of moderating's not the perfect word, right? But anyone that's in the position that is trying to facilitate civil dialogue and have tough conversations, what do you think? What have you guys tried at the Pitt chapter over the years that's worked? What hasn't worked? And what advice would you give to people that are in that space?
So I would say there's a couple of key things that I always keep in mind. I think having goal-oriented conversations where, like, what are you trying to achieve with this conversation? What are you trying to do? I think having that in mind can be incredibly helpful for guiding the conversation to actually be productive. Because if you are just aimlessly having a conversation, while it could be fun and helpful, like, it's not really going to achieve what you want it to achieve. And it's important. So something I really strongly believe in, I would say, is that if you want to change someone else's mind, I would say it's almost not reasonable for you to expect them to change their mind if you're not willing to change your own. Humans are stubborn. People, are going to not, if I believe in something, and someone else tries to convince me of something else, but I feel like they're not listening to, my opinion, I'll be like, if they heard my opinion, then they'd understand and they'd agree with me, but they're not even trying to learn my opinion. So, why would I try to take on theirs if I still have reason to believe in mine? And so like I think those conversations, it always starts with yourself. It always starts with, okay, I may be right about this. I may believe very strongly in this. And, you should always, of course, hold on to your beliefs and, believe in them and be passionate about them. But if you have the goal of trying to change someone's mind, then you need to recognize that if you really want to achieve that in the end, you have to start with being willing to change your own mind. Because if you're willing to change your own mind and the other person can recognize that, then they will feel comfortable changing their own mind about that same issue. And then you can have genuine conversation where people can feel heard and can feel as though they're able to share their beliefs in a way that can actually be understood by the other person. And that's something that I think is like extremely important. And like it's not an easy thing to do, especially for, I'll say with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, like it's a serious, awful thing that's going on, and it's not something where people can easily, be like, oh, I may be wrong about this, because for one thing, like you very well may be right about it, and like people feel strongly because serious things are going on. To put it sort of broadly, but so it's a difficult thing to do, to be able to be, to engage in those conversations in a way where you can really put your own beliefs to the side. So it's not necessarily something I expect, everyone to be able to do, because, it's a very difficult thing to do, especially in certain circumstances. But I think that, if people are able to engage in conversations about that or about other things in a way where they go into the conversation of trying to understand, okay, like how is it possible that you could disagree, but like actually trying to understand how it's possible that the other person could disagree.
Yeah.
Like really trying to be like, because like usually it's pretty like mind-boggling. Like how is it possible you could believe that? And maybe they are unjustified in believing that thing. But if you don't approach the conversation with actual like inquiry and wanting to know and wanting to really understand, then the other person, I feel like it really can't be expected that they will want to treat that conversation the same way.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, like, for people to recognize that if they want to change someone else's mind, they really do have to start with themselves. Just as like a principle, even if it seems unfair or unreasonable, because you very well may be right. You may be arguing with someone who is a bad person and who has ill intent, with what they believe in. You can't. It's almost in my belief, I think it's often not feasible to expect them to change their mind if they don't feel at least heard, and at least as if the other person is trying to understand what they believe in, what they're saying.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Yeah, it's not, and I think that's the tough part, because I think people hear that, and sometimes people jump to, oh, I think you make a good point. Like it's not even that you have to change your mind. It's just that you're willing to suspend your disbelief for a few minutes. Just the idea that you would go, okay, just for a moment, let me just entertain the idea that this might not be correct, and maybe there's something else out there that's better.
Yeah.
And I think that another good point too you made is, I think that you have to be willing to actually listen to people. That's a tough part. It's a tough combination of things to do. I mean, it's not easy. I agree with you there. And I think that's an important thing to talk about. Is like, it's not something that you can just do. Like, you have to work on it.
And I will say, just to add on to that, like I believe I speak from a place of privilege. A lot of different issues that people have to deal with around the world, I don't have to deal with in the same way, if at all. And so it is easier for me to say, you should really try to listen and understand, because, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that I can have a conversation about and then walk away from that conversation and almost not have to think about it because it doesn't affect me directly, versus other people, they would walk into that conversation, try to, get their voice heard, and no matter what, when they leave the conversation, they're still dealing with that issue. Because like obviously the issue itself isn't solved from a conversation. It's, the whole point of the conversation is to try to help, other people understand the issue in a new way and then change it from that. So like I do want to recognize that I definitely speak from a place where it is easier to even just say that that's something people should do. But I say it because I really think that it is. And I really think that it's something where even in at least some conversations, if you're able to carry that and to try to do that, I do think people would be maybe a little bit surprised by the results it can bring, just as far as getting someone else to, have a little more like sympathy for your beliefs and ideas, and just to make them feel a little bit less hostile to what you're saying. So yeah, I just want to add that in real quick.
Yeah, of course. And what about tips for, in the moment of that conversation, handling tension, handling people that are getting emotional? What kind of stuff do you think people can do to ease that?
So I think it's important when people are having these conversations to try to be mindful, not only for people to be mindful of their own emotions, but for like if there's a moderator or someone actually trying to facilitate the dialogue, to be mindful of the participants' emotions. Because again, like a lot of issues, if it affects you directly, like it's not going to be easy to talk about always. And so trying to be mindful of the fact that because obviously when you are feeling, I'll say emotionally like wound up or like, like even like justifiably, like you're feeling really like emotionally distraught by what's being said, like it's going to be much tougher to be able to have I'll say like a productive conversation because, it's not something that's easy to hear at that point. So I think if people are able to, just try to be consciously aware of, when they aren't in the right position to, really have that kind of like, I'll say productive conversation, if people should be welcome to step back for a moment and there's no harm or shame in that. Like that's something where that's just a part of recognizing that, right now I'm not able to achieve the purpose of this conversation because of, how I'm feeling or what's being said. And you're very well justified in those feelings. But at that point, it's I think it's smart and healthy for people to be able to step back and be like, this is not something that I want to talk about, with this person. Like, that's totally fair. And that's just a part of people trying to, have healthy, productive dialogue. So I think that's definitely one thing, is just being conscious of your like emotions, and the emotions of other people. And I would hope that in those kinds of dialogues, that people who are instigating those emotions to other people, or those emotions of other people, that they would be able to recognize that, even if what they are saying they see as like harmless, that they're able to be aware of the fact that, okay, clearly, these words are harmful to someone else, or they feel harmed by them. So as a part of recognizing that I want to engage in productive conversation with this person, I need to fix what I'm saying and do a better job of phrasing it in a way, or approaching it in a way, that is going to not instigate those kinds of emotions.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely something where, because I think a lot of people go into conversations, and I don't want that to be a misconception about Bridge and what we do, because, the Bridge doesn't exist so everyone can just say whatever they want. Bridge exists so people can engage in productive dialogue and share their ideas and experiences. And so civil dialogue isn't about saying whatever you want and just being an open space to just like, say and do whatever you want. It's about approaching dialogue in the right way. And so, as a part of someone who's trying to engage in productive dialogue, you have to recognize that, it's not a place for me to say whatever I want. It's a place for me to try to formulate my ideas in a way that can be understood by someone else. And to try to engage with their ideas in a way that, I can understand. And so I think that's something where it's just super important, because like often, like, like what's a shame is what, you often see that goes viral on like YouTube or TikTok or whatever, especially like I would say like, 5 or so years ago, it would always be those like debate videos where someone's like winding up the other person and then ends in an argument. They're yelling, and it's just like, this person's gone soft. Like they can't handle, whatever facts. So it's like those kinds of conversations, like it especially over time, I just got more and more annoyed when I would see them, because I'm like this is so just disingenuous to the point of having those conversations. Like people are just so uninterested, especially with the way, people are trying to like, make it on YouTube, and the things that gets clicks are the people, or the videos where people are getting angry and, yelling. And then, those are the kinds of things that people watch on YouTube, unfortunately. And so it's a shame that that's sort of what a lot of it's become, because people are just trying to make money on YouTube,
Gavin and I just talked about that. Like
Yeah.
the man on the street content stuff is another one. It's like you just cherry pick the answers that give you whatever you want, and then
Exactly.
you put them all together, and then you create. And that's something in a book I'm listening to right now talks about, is that social media has the ability to create fake majorities that don't really exist, and then you can
Yeah.
kind of corral people into silence or into something, a position you want them to be in, by creating the illusion of a large group of people that aren't even there. And that's, I think, a tough part. I think those debate videos are another one too. Like the change my mind stuff is just out of control.
That's the
at
first
this
thing that
point.
comes
I
to
mean,
mind.
It's
Yeah.
out of control. And I like what you said about being in those conversations, like being cognizant of what you say, because I think the one thing that I have noticed a lot more just in conversations with friends that might politically disagree, or even in spaces on campus, is that this like just happened earlier this week, is that, and this is maybe a bit of an overgeneralization, but I think on the whole, in the most charitable sense, people that are more conservative, more on the right, will take the approach to speech that I need to figure out exactly what I need to say. I need to articulate my thoughts. So I am going to speak as freely as I feel like I need to get my point across. Now, in the process, I might say something wrong. I might say something that I should not have said, but it's not necessarily out of a place of malice as much of it is out of a place of trying to figure out where exactly you are on a certain position.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, the most generous interpretation of people on the left is that they're saying, no, you do need to be more cognizant of the things you say because words matter. And if you say something that is potentially viewed as harmful or bigoted or hateful towards another person, then that kind of muddies the water. It makes the space less open. It makes those people less willing to engage in the conversation. And I've watched that happen in real time among friends, where the conservative friend maybe says something they should not have said, but it's not out of a place of malice. They're just trying to figure out a thought. And then the friend that's more on the left tries to check them on it, and then they get annoyed by that, and then it just kind of spirals out of control at that point. So I think that is kind of an important thing, and it's not that you're trying to police anybody's speech necessarily. It's that you kind of have to be mindful of that. That's, and again, it's maybe an overgeneralization, but that's kind of the dynamic you're working with. Like people on the left that say you shouldn't say certain things, it doesn't always necessarily come from a place of like censorship or something like that. It does come out of a consideration for other people in the space.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just another thing too that people should be kind of just generally mindful of.
Yeah, on that I would say, especially, I'm someone who likes to view, or who holds the view that people are capable of change, and we should try to support people who want to grow and change. Because we're all humans, we all are experiencing the world in our own unique way, but we're all, every day, at least in my experience, like I learn something new. And I always feel like I'm a different person than I was like a week ago. Like I always feel like I'm like, oh, like now I have this understanding that, changes how I look at this or how I, live my everyday life. And so, if people are actually trying to, expand how they view the world and trying to, grow as people, I think people should be supportive of that, and should try to be as, at least try not to be as disingenuous about critiques on people, because people who grow up in different spaces like have different understandings of different things. I wouldn't expect someone who grew up in a super like rural area in middle nowhere Pennsylvania to speak about political issues the same way as someone who grew up in a city. And I think that if it's someone who even if they're less knowledgeable about something but really wants to try to understand, people should try to do their best to be supportive of that person, and to try to, because I think that it's also totally fair to be correcting that person if they say something that's like, if it is something that's harmful, like of course call them out. But if they're speaking in a way that isn't in a way that's like welcoming to everyone who's in the group, and isn't speaking in a way that's actually leading to productive dialogue, then I think that how it should happen is that person should, be like, I'll say called out. Like they should recognize, hey, just so you know, like the way you're saying that, like that makes some people in this group feel uncomfortable. and makes them feel isolated or whatever it may be. And that person should, if there's someone who is trying to really trying to do their best at being considerate of other people and trying to engage in productive dialogue and expand their own way of viewing the world, they should ideally respond positively to that. Be like, you're right, I'm sorry, I will do better with that. And then at that point, in the perfect world, people will be able to move on from that, and that person will do a better job, be more aware, and then I think obviously it can be more difficult when if something's said that is really harmful and like someone's saying that's not okay, don't say that. Like I could totally see how someone who maybe didn't mean anything by it and that they had no idea the impact of what they said was could be like like I feel like I'm being attacked right now, and then they get a little defensive. Like I totally see how that stuff could happen. I've seen that stuff happen.
Yeah, I think that happens more often than people think. Like I think that people get too quick to jump on statements that are made like that without first interpreting whether or not that's actually coming from a genuine place, or if it's because it's happened to me. Like I've said things not on purpose, of course, but I've said things that's like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. That's not the right way to approach that. And that's not censorship. That's not whatever. It's just, I think you said, it's just trying to be considerate of the space. And I think, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're all good. No worries.
Just because that's the thing is a big one that I see is that it almost seems like sometimes, and I just think the culture is just, I think it's just a product of the culture. I think social media has done a lot of this, but I think people sit down in conversations, and one of the BridgeUSA norms of discussion is listen to listen, not to respond. I think the active listening rule. But I think, and that is listening in order to understand. But I think what happens is sometimes people, and I don't think this comes from a malicious place. I think again, it's just kind of what's incentivized. Is they sit down and they end up just put up the radar for those kinds of statements. But they don't look for anything underneath it. They just wait to hear something and then they jump on it. And I think everybody does that. That's like I don't think that's exclusive to any ideology. I think that's just a thing that people do now, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think part of that is just like obviously, and I do agree that I think that stuff is something that happens a lot. I think obviously that kind of behavior isn't conducive to a productive conversation.
No.
But again, like just like as reiterate, like I think that in all circumstances, it's important to call out the behavior or the wording, whatever it may be, and recognize that that wording has the effect that it has on, people who are participants in that dialogue. And, I think it's important to recognize that if that person is not trying to be disingenuous, if they apologize for their own, like, I'm so sorry, I did not realize that how I said that would have that kind of impact, and if they show a genuine effort to try to fix that and improve on that, then I, in my personal belief, I think that they should be, other people in the conversation should still be doing their best to make that person feel welcome to the conversation, and not feel like they have to, and not make them feel like that they are an out group in the conversation because they don't have that same understanding of the world. So, yeah, I guess that's what I'd say on that generally.
Yeah. Switching tracks here a little bit. This is something I'm just curious about because I'm in a poli-sci class right now. I almost picked it as my minor, and then I didn't. I almost majored in it, and I also didn't do that either. I'm just in a class, I think, to fill a credit requirement or something. I do like the class, but I don't even remember.
Which class is it?
It's just Introduction to the Study of Government, which is like it's a 250 class, but it is interesting because it's studying other governmental systems outside of the United States.
That's
so
cool.
looking at everything. Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't remember signing up for like any of the classes I'm in this semester. I'm like, how did I end up in here? I just don't know. I'm just there. I don't even know.
Feel the same way, yeah.
But the one thing I've heard about poli-sci programs is that what ends up happening if you stick it out to the end, what happens is that program kind of weeds out people that are just in it for like social media clout, or that are just in it because they're like super ideological people. And what I've heard is that through the years, less and less of those people make it to the end And then by the time you're a senior, if you're a poli-sci major, you're for the most part surrounded by people that are willing to engage with ideas they disagree with. Have you noticed that at all going through
I
the
will
whole
say,
thing?
I remember just like back senior year, looking at, cause like, I don't know if you had this, but at my high school, you know, like there was an Instagram account that would post like where everyone's going and what they're studying. And I remember seeing on that and also on like the Pitt class of 2025 Facebook page where people were trying to find roommates. Like it was a surprisingly large number of people that were poli-sci majors at the time who I was like, wow. And I think at the time it was just like people were into politics because of everything that's been going on. That was like a little after 2020, you know, so people cared about politics, and were passionate at the time. So I definitely think that a lot of people had started, because like, you know, I look around now, definitely don't think there's nearly as many poli-sci majors who are seniors right now than there were back freshman year. So I think a lot of people, like even from that, like I find it very interesting, like your sort of perspective on what sort of causes that, and that could totally be fair. I don't really know too much about why it's the case that poli-sci majors have sort of dropped off. But what you're saying does make sense. I think it's definitely very realistic. But I will say though is like I guess it depends what your focus is as a political science major. But in my focus, my focus is American politics, I've still taken a lot of political theory courses, and those courses are usually the most interesting ones for me because it's so cool. Like I'm taking one right now, called Feminist Political Thought, and I'm reading about a ton of different feminist authors and speakers from over the last, like, I'll say several centuries. And it's like a really cool class because like I'm learning about all these different perspectives that they had upon, you know, their experiences, and the impact that those individuals had on, you know, society. And so a lot of it is engaging, and it's a lot of ideas that, you know, I never considered before. So a lot of it's like early feminist thought, which is like at the time was super, like, I'll say revolutionary in how people view the world. So it's like in those classes, like from not only that class, but all of the political theory classes I've taken, like it's all been about learning about different theories and perspectives. And, you know, I feel like, because I even will read about people who maybe weren't so great. I kind of forget.
That's a lot of history classes.
Yeah.
Reading about a lot of not great people. Right?
I can remember even early political theory, you know, we learned about a lot of the really classic political theorists like Rousseau or whoever. Pronouncing that right.
Yeah, you got
but
it.
Some of them, I think it might have been him. I don't want to, I'm not sure if it was, but I remember one of them, like we were learning about their political theory beliefs and stuff like that. And they were like, you know, they had some contribution to a lot of modern, like, political theological thought, but also they believed like some pretty racist stuff as well. And so you're like, oh, okay, like these are, you know, you learn about different people from different political theories who are not all great. And so it's like, oh, like, okay, but now I understand the impact of that political theory and how, you know, maybe the harm it caused on society and on the world in different ways. So like political theory, like you do learn about all different kinds of like political perspectives from it. And I think naturally, because you engage with the content in such a way where, you know, you're focused on trying to understand the nuances of that political belief and theory and, you know, way of thinking, that you just learn how to engage with new ideas in a very formulaic manner, you know. And so I think that's something where, like a lot of people who are political science majors who are now seniors and have taken all the courses they need to take, like they naturally do have a predisposition, I'd say, to engaging with ideas in a way that's super educational and super, like, I don't know what the word is exactly I'm trying to think of, but in a super, I'll say, genuine way.
Yeah.
In, you know, a very like just philosophical way. So yeah, I definitely would say I see that trend a bit for sure.
Yeah, I'd imagine that. I mean, obviously, every major is going to start off with, because that's just because people drop out of college, right? People transfer, so obviously you're always going to have less at the end than when you started, right?
You're right.
Very, I guess if people like transferred in and then nobody left, you could have more.
Right.
I just find that
that's
kind of
very
unlikely, right?
Yeah.
Chances are you're going to end up with less than you start, but yeah, it's just something that I forget who or where I heard this from. And I don't, you know, hey, whatever. But it was like most of the people that are kind of in it just for the clout of the thing end up just like leaving to go be like Instagram activists or whatever. Like they don't even like stay in the
Is
program.
that a common trend?
I don't know. It's just something that I heard. I don't even. But it does. But it kind of makes sense though, I think, because I do think what happens is, and this is not a critique of our generation, but I think it is a thing where, like you said, back then a lot of people wanted to get involved. They might not have known exactly how. they might have picked out poli-sci thinking this is like kind of what I want to do, but then you realize
Yeah.
that there's other avenues to engage with the world of politics that like I'm not even, it's nowhere in my degree. It's nowhere anywhere, but I'm doing more engaging with
Yeah,
it
right,
than
exactly.
than I probably would have at
Yeah.
any other time. So I'd imagine that a lot of people, I imagine some people do fall out of it because, like I said, like I've this is like my second poli sci course that I've taken. The first one I was not a fan of. It's just, so I imagine that
Which
some
course
people
was
also.
that? Out of curiosity.
I forget what I took. I took something like in the beginning of my sophomore year. I was in. Oh gosh. I don't remember what it was called. I just remember that I wasn't a huge fan of it, and but yeah, that's just kind of what I figured is that by the end you're going to end up with a group of people that are much more willing to engage with ideas that they disagree
Yeah, I
with.
totally
Again, I
see
think
that, yeah.
because you have to, right? So in order to make it through the whole thing, you have
Yeah.
to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
So on the how many people are on the board at the BridgeUSA Pitt now? How many people you guys have?
We
Like a
currently have,
million?
I think, for on the board, it's like
Yeah.
7, I think.
Okay.
Right now. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we
So you guys lost some people.
might have downsized slightly after last year,
I was
which was
gonna say.
probably a good thing because we had
Yeah.
a pretty large. Don't get me wrong, loved everyone on the board, but
Yeah.
it was just a large board. It was like a 9-person board before, so
Yeah,
it was like
I thought it
a
was
lot
more than
to
that.
handle. I don't know.
Oh.
And we also had like committee positions and stuff, so it was
I
like
heard 14 at one point.
maybe counting committee positions, it might have sort of gotten
Okay.
close to that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, right now we downsized a little bit, and it's definitely been good as far as people having their exact roles and knowing what they're supposed to be doing. So like it has been, and just also like the deliberation to try to figure out different plans and what we should do, and like if we take votes on stuff, like it was so much like obviously disagreement on how we should do things, where it's like ends up taking forever to like actually. I know again like it's great because I did actually really appreciate all the input from everyone on the board. Like everyone had unique insight on how we should run events or whatever, but obviously just a natural part of that is just it did end up taking a lot of bureaucracy, it just ended up taking a long time for everything to get figured out.
Of course.
So-
Very quickly. Very
Yeah.
quickly. Just the first time that we met was at the summit in Orlando
Yes.
2 years ago. And I remember we were in downtown. I just wanted to get breakfast. And this is the problem. You can't put too many bridge builders in a group together because then there's too much nuance and you can't make a decision at the end because I just wanted breakfast.
I
And
do
everybody
remember
was
that,
like,
yeah.
"What about this?
We
What
talked
about
for
that?
so
What about
long,
that?"
yeah.
And eventually I was like, I'm
No,
going
let me
to this place
let me
over here.
understand. Why do you want to go here? Let me understand. I really want to broaden my perspective. Why do
This is
you want to
the
go to this
problem.
restaurant?
You can't put too many bridge builders in a group
Yeah.
because it's an issue. Because I was like, I just want food, man, and I just picked a spot. I was like, I'm going here, and then I think people follow me. I don't even know. It was really funny, like. So
I do remember
imagine if
that.
there's 9 people on a board. You're trying to make a decision. God, it would take so
Yeah.
long because
It's the
everyone's
worst
gotta-
kind of people on there.
Everyone's got to break
everyone's too-
down their position.
Yeah,
and why
everyone's-
do you feel that way? Let me understand. It's a problem. You can't. It is a detriment sometimes. You can't.
The least productive board is
I-
everyone's too
Right.
like open-minded about wanting to like understand what other people want to do certain things.
Right. I just remember that. I was like, oh my God, we're all still delivering.
I think by the time you made a decision on the breakfast, we were like, you know what? We've been talking for like an hour now. Like we just got to go somewhere. Let's go.
Everybody was like, I think there's a spot 3 blocks down. And I was like, I'm looking
No, it was
at
like right there. We could see it
Right,
in
I
our
was
view.
like, I'm looking at 4 places. Let's pick one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember that was very funny. In that moment, I was like, oh, this is why you can't. This is why you maybe have to have somebody that's like, enough. Let's make a decision.
right, yeah.
You have to- but so on that board with that 7 people, and I would imagine you're somewhat aware of this. I don't know how much disclosing of individual ideological positions everybody has, but do you guys have a pretty good split of thought on there?
I'd say relatively. I mean, to be honest, like a lot of the way, obviously, even I just view political leanings and like I'd say perspectives, whatever, is like I don't really always view it as like as much of like a scale of left to right, just because
Yes.
I do
Yes.
like I guess kind of foundationally believe that like people hold their beliefs based upon their specific experiences, and not everyone's experience is going to align with all of the things that make someone believe in something that's left leaning or right leaning. Like it's just not as concrete as that. I mean, most of our board is left leaning for sure, just because like when we are a university, most students I believe
Sure.
are left leaning. So like
Yeah.
we actively on our board, I think when we be honestly like we only have like one person who really is like, I would say, right leaning. A few people who I think would kind of consider themselves like kind of moderates in a way, and the rest left leaning. So it's like we maybe we could have more political diversity. We definitely do, just in our own personal thoughts on random specific issues. We have like, very different ways of looking at it, which is why I don't, always like to see it as like where people lie on the spectrum too much.
Yeah.
Just like even still, there's still so much like versatility or not versatility, like just differences in how exactly people view things. But I think we still, regardless, do a good job of making it a space where people from, I'll say all over the political spectrum can come if they're, genuine about wanting to engage in dialogue, making them feel like welcome there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've been saying that too recently. I don't even necessarily believe in the left-right thing anymore at this point. Like, I believe in it. Like, there are two different, I guess, dominant ideologies that are existent in this country.
Yeah.
But I don't really view it as. I think like Manu has a good point when he says like it's a temperament thing. It's not necessarily a what you. It's not necessarily a what you think problem. It's a how you think problem at this point. Like I to me at this point, it's more of a separation between people that are willing to engage with ideas they disagree with and give those voices a space, than people that are not willing to do that. And I have friends on the left and the right that are in both of those camps.
Yeah.
So that to me is like probably where more of it lies than like a strict left-right thing anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's something where like even I have friends who like are part of a certain political party. Say most of my generally from like they're like part of the Democratic Party. But like even sometimes they'll be like this is like one issue where I'm like I just don't feel as strongly about this. They might have some sort of like dissenting opinion slightly from it. I mean, obviously, part of why political parties and affiliations are the way they are is because it's certain values that people hold that just naturally lead them to have certain opinions on different issues, which again makes it just reasonable. Like it's expected. It makes sense that people would hold similar or the same belief on two different issues because it's the same value that's perpetuating that belief.
Right.
Obviously, so it's like there is like it's not just like for no reason, just how it happened to be that that liberals believe a certain thing, conservatives believe another thing. It's because of those values that people find themselves on those in those sort of like groups. But yeah, no, I just think that's why it's like important to engage, like in idea or just engage in politics and political thought in a way that's less like rigid in that perspective. Like I don't know, like I would identify myself as being like liberal, in the things I believe in. But even so, like I don't always love that, because then just naturally when I would engage in discussion with people, like I can tell it's just like, oh, there's already that like belief about like there's always of course that assumption about what I believe.
Yes. You put yourself in a box.
Yeah.
And that's not fun because then you have to.
Yeah.
You got to like redraw it a bunch of times and whatever.
Yeah. And even if there's a lot of things where like I match up on that box, it's like I still would prefer if the conversation, then happens still in a way where it's like we know nothing about each other.
Yeah.
Even though you may believe in this one thing, I'm not going to assume why you believe it, what calls you to believe it. Like I still think it's just so important to engage in ideas in a way of understanding the foundations of what calls you to believe that thing. What experiences have you had in your life that led you to believe in what you believe in. And I think sometimes like party affiliations can kind of get in the way with that because people just assume why people believe what they believe.
Yeah.
Which is just like, even if they're not incorrect, it's just like not the most, if you're really trying to engage in productive conversation, not the most productive way of looking at it, is what I believe. So, yeah.
A lot of times, we used to do we haven't done one in a while because we can't find conservatives anywhere in the greater Pitt. I might just start siphoning them off of you guys at Pitt because I don't know where they're at Airport Park. But when we did the podcast in here, I wouldn't tell anybody what anybody's affiliation was. And it's so much better that way. Like at some point, I'm going to stop asking pretty soon whenever I have general conversation. I'm just going to stop asking because like you said, it's much easier to not have those preconceived notions about what people think and what they believe. It's much better to just figure it out as you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's better to do that.
Just engage in the ideas. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, just because if you have to be like, oh, like who do you... The craziest thing, people will just ask like who you voted for in the last election. I'm like, guys, can you come up with like a worse way to start the conversation than this? He's not good. Okay, question. As someone that is outside of the media in general, what would your biggest critique be? I guess especially political media, because that's just a space that I'm just really surrounded by this semester, and I'm a little sick and tired of it. But I'm just curious, like, what would your biggest critiques be of the political media in this country as somebody that's not as connected to it, or not as directly connected, I guess.
Right,
as
not like a
Gavin
part of
and
the
I are.
media.
Yeah, right.
Much,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends what kind of media you're looking at. I'll be honest. I use like Twitter a fair amount, and so I see a lot of like random political stuff on Twitter. I will say I think that the way, especially social media, has kind of like functioned a bit, is just gradually more and more misinformation is what spreads around, especially on Twitter. Fortunately, Twitter has like a fact check kind of thing, like a community notes, I think it's called,
Yes.
where people are able to, like, people who have knowledge about something are able to correct people when they're spreading mass misinformation. But even so, it can only do so much. There's still so much misinformation that's spread.
Yeah.
And then often it's just, I don't know. I know I have my own opinions on Elon Musk. I'll be candid, they're not super fond opinions of him.
Sure.
Because, and mainly that stems because of the fact that I'm speaking about Twitter a lot because like I think that Twitter does play an important role. I think a lot of people use Twitter to get information from there. But like when Elon Musk bought Twitter, he was saying, "Oh, we'll make this the town square of free speech and free information."
Yeah.
Which I guess in the perfect world that sounds fine, even though that's not what Twitter is supposed to be. So I already have my own quarrels with that.
Sure.
But it's become a place where now I see so many tweets on my timeline that just spread so much misinformation, and even the things that I see him repost and stuff like that, like as the CEO of Twitter or whatever his position is technically, like just that's stuff that just isn't true. And so it's just kind of like it's just strange to kind of use it now because I'm like I'm always wondering like, okay, like are people really believing this? Like is this something that like is actually going to affect the way people think? Because I don't know, it's just like it's there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens on there. And so if that's the way that people are really engaging with politics as like their main format, it definitely worries me a little bit. Yeah, because I'm like, if that's really like how you get information, like that's just because of the current state of it, it's just like really worrying.
I wonder how much of it's dead internet theory, which is like the idea.
I've heard about that. Can you explain what dead internet theory is?
Let me quickly look it up just to make sure I don't.
Is that the idea that everything is like created, all content's like created for us, not by real people or something? I don't know.
I think that's a part of it. So from what I understand, it's the idea that most of the internet is bots, and I've stepped into muddy water here. It's apparently an online conspiracy theory.
Man,
we're getting into conspiracy
the
content.
Computer's doing that.
We're getting into conspiracy content.
The AI
on the
bots
show,
who are running the dead internet theory and who are making it real are the ones trying to shut that idea down.
That's not good.
They don't want to get caught.
So maybe this isn't exactly what
it's the one conspiracy theory that I'll believe in.
Okay. So this is not it. This is okay. So this is a different thing. So let's just forget I said that.
Okay.
I think it's essentially the idea that most of the content on social media, what is it, like 90% of the content is being generated by 10% of the most active users on social media, and I think on the internet at large.
Yeah, totally.
And at the same time, it's just flooded with bots, and the bots are a part of that most active group of people. So I guess when I was saying dead internet, I just mean the fact that like a lot of what you see might not even be made by a real person, but it is being made for people. It is being curated to stir up shit and to cause problems.
Yeah.
And I think that is definitely so that's a tough thing. It's like I have the same feeling. I go on Instagram comment sections and I'm just horrified by like just what I see. Not even like hateful stuff, just like people that I'm like haven't used their brain in years apparently, just real bad. But then I have to sit back and wonder, are half of these comments that I'm reading even made by real people? And if they are real people, are they just trolling? That's why it's really tough to tough to figure that stuff out, because like you could be a real person and then you're just fucking around, you're just having fun. It's tough.
It's so that's why it's like it's just I don't know.
I'm going less and less on there. I'm spending less and less time.
Well, yeah, sometimes I use social media and it is just a thought of like, this is so strange. Like just like thinking of like if it is real people who are saying these things. It's like it's just so like weird to think about. I don't know.
I
Like
wish there was a way
it
to
really
know.
has changed the way people talk and engage with ideas.
Yeah.
Like it's just so I don't know, it's so strange.
I wish there was a way to know, even though, okay, this is a very, I don't know exactly, this is an impossible line in the sand to draw, but like, I wish that, obviously, like when it's just comedy, when it's like funny stuff, trolling is fine. Like I don't see a problem with it. Like if you're just, because I'm ridiculous, I do it sometimes in my ethics class. Have I told you about this? In my ethics class, I just grift for fun, and I'll just always go the other way. Like it's for the most part a relatively ideologically monolithic class, or at least it behaves like that. So I always just have to go the other way just for fun. And it's never like crazy stuff. I'll just do it for fun.
Yeah.
And then I go, oh, I get why Candace it's fun. I get why Candace Owens does it now. It's fun. I just go the other way. So I like that when it's just being funny, but when it's like discussing policy or world issues, I wish there was a way to know if these people, because if they were trolls, I would just ignore them and be like, hey,
Yeah, right. You wouldn't engage with it.
this is just a
like,
zero. Like
yeah.
this person should have a voice, but it should not be taken seriously. It's just a zero on the thing. Just let it be there, but it's a zero.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish there was a way to know, because I feel like that would make everything much easier. It's just tough to know.
Yeah, I think it's funny actually. Sometimes
And that was supposed to be the verification thing that Elon just never did. That was supposed to be the point, was that
No
only
more bots,
real human
but
beings could get
then-
verified.
I
But
don't
I'm
know.
fairly certain that's just not, that didn't. I'm fairly certain that's
No,
just
I
not
mean,
true.
I will say, I think there's a reason. There's a reason you can't see who liked certain posts anymore. And I think it's because, like, before, even after, I heard him say, oh, we got rid of all the bots. For one thing, I still see bots, but also,
I'm
like,
not so convinced.
a lot of different posts would be like-botted. All the likes are from accounts who have
Yes.
0 followers but are following 200 people with no profile name, a very
Right.
basic, Twitter
Sometimes you
handle.
can-
So it's like,
you can kinda tell
you can tell it's a bot in those cases, but it's like, now he's kind of hiding that a little bit. You can't really see who's liking posts anymore. You can't see if it's like-botted.
And there's just
But-
TikTokers buying subscribers. People buy
yeah.
views, so it's impossible to know. I mean,
Right,
some of these
exactly,
things that go
yeah.
viral, it's like this could be completely. And that was one thing we talked about 2 weeks ago on the show with a friend of ours that came in here. We were like, some of these people that are famous on social media, you couldn't even put a finger on why. You couldn't even list a
Yeah,
reason
right.
as to why they're so popular. And who knows? They could have bought the 1
Like,
million.
who's watching
likes.
this?
Right?
Who's
Like,
engaging with this
for?
content?
Right?
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
So going back to, so then how do you solve the misinformation problem? What do you think some of I saw Tangle News did a good post about this where they kind of outlined possible solutions, and I thought it was I wish maybe I'll pull it up. What do you think though? Like, how do you think we'd solve this problem?
The problem with misinformation is definitely tough, even just from a broad scale, because so many people, will believe, will think that misinformation is different things. And, like what's categorized as misinformation is just so, just how people handle it is so subjective. Not that there isn't things that are misinformation and that are not misinformation, but people call things misinformation, to call different things misinformation depending upon what lies within what they agree with and stuff like that. So it's like misinformation. It's funny actually. Also, the way it's used to is interesting. Just to mention Elon again a little bit. It was funny because he made a tweet about. He was like, "Oh, the people who use the word disinformation are usually the ones that are spreading it," referring to people on the left who are calling out the disinformation that's on Twitter. But then, like, I saw one of the replies was a screenshot of countless Elon Musk tweets from the last couple weeks of him using the word disinformation. And it's just like, it's interesting the way that term is politicized to just mean whatever people want it to mean. And people can accuse something being disinformation without any real warrant to. And then, that people who want it to be disinformation will believe it's disinformation. So it's kind of just like a weird line, especially like, because the whole thing with Twitter now or with X, it's like, it wants to be a place of more free speech. People can say whatever they want. And obviously, the reality is like the result of more free speech, I think it depends on the context, but often results in more misinformation in that things obviously aren't like called out in the same way.
Sure.
Of course, obviously less free speech in like some authoritarian government is like, the government controls what's the correct thing, So obviously that's a lack of free speech, of course. So there's two ends to it.
Yeah, like too in a weird way.
It always is. Yeah.
Too much of it in the wrong situation is not good, and then in the same sense that not enough of it or none of it at all is also not
It's
good.
kind of the arbiter of who decides what's information a little bit, which is why
That's always been the
the idea of community notes is I would say probably the only thing, or I don't know everything he's added, so probably maybe one of the few things that Elon Musk did with Twitter that I actually liked because I thought it was a good thing because of the fact that it's like the people who are doing community notes are people who are reputable people who are able, like I think to my knowledge, the people who have access to community notes are people who are like professionals in their field and are knowledgeable about whatever they're talking about. So it's like, I think as a foundation of society, we should generally have trust for those people who, dedicate their life to having knowledge about that thing.
Yeah.
And so like that's something where it's like, okay, I think it's good that it's a space where people, it's like a very clear marker. If someone's saying something that's not true, it's a clear community note right beneath that's saying what the truth is then if that's not true.
Sure.
So it's like it's a good thing. I think I really like that.
I hope the bots
but-
aren't like fact checking stuff. That would be an issue.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Usually, like I don't know, community notes have gotten so funny because like if people say something that's really so just like incredibly not true, like you can tell the community note person's just like annoyed. He's like, what are you talking about? Because they'll literally say like, this is,
Right.
they'll literally be like, this is just not true. It's like that's the whole community note, and it's just like, but like literally they're right because it's like just something that's so blatantly untruthful that it's just like, I don't know. But like there's such a spike in the tweets in general that are just spreading like direct lies or direct misinformation, and then like I don't know, then it becomes a thing of like, I think the balance of having it be community notes that, I again, I don't need to think more about this. I would say right now that I think it's better for rather than like things being taken down, like for instance, like since Elon Musk took over, a lot of like journalists have been banned off the app. And I think that like cutting it off on Twitter, of course, like as long as it's not violating like hate speech guidelines, whatever.
Yeah.
But like I think that rather than like forcing the post to be like not visible to people or like banning the account is like not the preferred way, but having a direct community note saying just underneath like, well, this person may have said this, a professional in the area says something otherwise, and they just want you to be aware of that. I think that's like a nice balance.
Yeah.
On having free speech, but also having it be at least slightly more truthful speech.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of like the solution is like that kind of like I'll say it's like almost middle ground type solution to addressing it. Because again, in the perfect world and a place where people can express their thoughts and be genuine about it, try to hear and learn about all the different experiences and perspectives that exist out there is a good thing. But the way it's being done in practice is not how it would be done in the perfect world. So like,
Yeah.
that's why I think like community notes is like a good balance to that as far as, kind of handling misinformation in like a respectable way.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to put you on the spot with like a.
Oh, no,
It's
you're good.
obviously it's a very tough problem to solve. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
No, people should go check this out. If you have Instagram and if you follow Tangle News, I'd go check out this post they put. I thought it was good. It went up on October 9th. It was about how to solve the misinformation problem, and I just want to read this very quickly. This is something that I guess one of their readers sent in. Now this is. Yeah, so this is the fifth slide of the post. It says, removing, quote, bad content from places we now seek out information is not the answer, though. A reader of ours once offered this analogy. Your job is to put out fires, in quote, or in parentheses, misinformation, in an area where arsonists, in parentheses, people spreading misinformation, are always setting fires. It takes many firefighters to contain the blaze once it's burning, and if there is a lot of dry brush and kindling, the fire spreads quickly. So you have three options. One, you continue fighting fires with hordes of firefighters, in this analogy, fact-checkers. Two, you focus on the arsonists, in parentheses, the people spreading misinformation, by alerting the town they're the ones starting fires, by banning them or labeling them. And three, you clear the kindling and the brush, which is to teach people how to spot lies, think critically, and ask questions, which I think is something that you were kind of saying there at some point, which is like you should be giving people the tools to spot this stuff as opposed to just taking everything on the platform that you see as like face value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I would hope people are able to. There's a lot of accounts, like especially because now you can just pay to be verified. That anyone can pay to be verified, and then obviously people with a check mark, people naturally associate with being more reputable and having more liability and not telling the truth. So therefore, they're going to more often tell the truth because they can't afford to not tell the truth, or whatever. Like that's just as like something that's associated with people who are verified in previous Twitter, or when it was called Twitter, I guess.
I still call it Twitter. I refuse.
I don't think anyone calls
I refuse to call it X.
The only people that call it X are like the Bitcoin like investors that I see. And like that's the people like X is the greatest new platform for
The crypto
whatever.
bros
Like that's mostly what I see.
for trading
Yeah.
my crypto coins.
I'll be sorry, a little off topic, but I don't understand how. Like I really don't get how Elon Musk thought that rebranding Twitter to X and calling tweets posts would help with the branding, because that kind of took away what made like the whole point of a tweet. It's like it's a tweet. It's like a random fleeting
Right.
thought. You just like
Right.
share it online.
Right.
People can react how they want, whatever. But it's like you just kind of like that's the whole point of it. But now it's like, oh, you're posting on X. It's like
Xing. I thought it was called Xing.
is that what it's called?
I don't even know.
That's the thing. There's like not even like a clear branding, I guess. But it's just like
Yeah.
it's lost. Like
I think it was because Twitter had a lot of problems, and he felt like they just needed something new
yeah.
to just make a clean break from all of the old problems, which I'm sure most of those are still a thing.
That's the kind of thing. What I found with Twitter, with the rebranding and the whole takeover of Elon Musk, is like a lot of the things that were addressed as problems in the past are now the same things.
Yeah.
Like because like before it was like, oh, I think Jack is the person who used to run Twitter.
Yes, Jack Dorsey.
Yeah. And if people would say like, oh, he was biased in making Twitter like a left-leaning social media platform, but now, and Elon Musk was saying like, we're gonna make this a not middle ground, but like a completely non-political place for people to share ideas, whatever.
Now it's just become right wing.
But now, like literally, in Elon Musk's bio, he's saying, "This is why I'm voting for Donald Trump," and puts a link. I just don't understand. Like, I don't use this often, but like, you kind of get lost in the plot there. 'Cause, like, now, like you're completely endorsing a political candidate, which is exactly like he's doing it. What he criticized Jack Dorsey for doing, he's now doing to a more extreme level. He's actually directly like supporting a candidate and directly doing that. Versus, I don't know much about before. Maybe Jack Dorsey like was like promoting content that was supporting whoever, or like banning accounts, whatever. I don't know what it was, but like
I think that was the thing that they got busted for, was that Twitter had gotten busted for taking. Now, both administrations gave Twitter money to do this, but they had taken a largely disproportionate amount of money from the Democrat Party to boost content and to censor content from the other from like right-leaning sources. So I think that was sort of the problem. I'm not sure if they were necessarily directly, openly in like Jack Dorsey's bio endorsing Hillary Clinton or Joe
that's the
Biden,
thing. Like it wasn't that overt.
But they were doing it.
I don't doubt that was happening.
But Elon is just straight up like that. That's hilarious. I didn't.
Dude, if you go on it, it's
voting
so,
for Trump.
It's so
that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's funny.
Yeah, that's crazy. So okay, so and we're gonna wrap here in a little bit. We're gonna get to some final questions. Okay, so here's a fun fact: every single political prediction I've ever made on this show has been absolutely wrong.
Okay.
I'm batting like 0 for whatever.
So who's winning the election? Who's gonna?
Right, that's what it was gonna be. Like whatever it is, like you're batting 300. I'm just in the opposite direction, like negative, whatever you would call that. I don't even know. Every single one, without fail, that I've ever made has come up incorrect on this show. So I'm just want to preface that this is a space to make incorrect predictions. This is a space for that. What do you think happens in November? What do you think is gonna? What do you think?
It is I don't know, it's really hard to tell right now. Polls are showing different things, so it's like it's I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know what polls I can really trust at this point. So like
I don't even look at. I don't even.
Really know.
I mean, I don't even. Every single one. They're all one day somebody's up, the next day another, and I'm just like, who are? I don't even know who we're surveying.
I think there was there's some company or whoever that does like a lot of polls. I forget what they're called. But I think even they had released 2 different polls about the same time that just showed different results as far as who was going to win the election. I'm like, I think it's just hard to tell right now. I see, I think there's a lot of activity, among young voters of getting out to vote and making their voices heard, especially this year. And so
I think Bugs Bunny is going to win.
I mean, I think it's realistic.
Because I'm voting for him.
It's very possible.
At this point, I'm voting for like 5 different people. I guess I'm voting 5 times.
Well, I mean, I voted 3 times, of course.
Right.
Like a good citizen.
Of course. I think I might vote just 5 times and 5 different people. I had a... Oh, boy. Okay. I just a quick story.
Okay.
I've said this, and I'm not going to go through. I promise I'm not going to do the whole bit, but I've just jokingly said, have you seen? Oh gosh, how do I do this? Have you seen who the Rizzler is? The kid on TikTok that does the. So I jokingly have. Yeah, right.
I know that. I'm familiar.
I've jokingly said that he's getting my vote in November, and it's becoming less and less of a joke the closer to the election that we get. And I walked into one of my classes this week, and I jokingly told, and again, I told and my professor didn't know who the Rizzler was. This was the explanation that I gave, right?
Yeah.
I said, Professor, I know who I'm voting for in November. She said, who are you voting for? And I said, well, there's this 14-year-old kid on TikTok who's like a hype beast. He's like a sneakerhead, and he reviews Costco food. And it's the worst content I've ever seen, and I have no idea why he's popular, but I think he's making like $1 trillion a month in ad deals on his Instagram page, and he's getting my vote. I'm voting for the Rizzler in November, right? And this professor thought that I was being serious and then proceeded to try to explain to me that by voting for a third party, I'm splitting the vote, and then that might mean that Trump wins, and it was a whole thing. And then I had to be like, no, professor, I'm joking. He's not even 18. He's like a kid on TikTok.
The thing is, like, I can't even blame him that much because, like, I think it was like 2016. There was like a notable number of people who voted for Kanye West for president at the time,
right, but
which was a fairly. I mean, I guess he was actually trying to run. That's true.
Right, Kanye's actually running a campaign. He was over the age.
That is true, I guess.
Yeah. Person. This is like an actual child that's on like TikTok, and he's a hype beast. And I was gonna vote for him, and my professor like. And she explained it in the most like condescending way, and I was just like, "Oh my god, I can't even with this." Like, I was like, "I'm joking, professor. I'm not voting for the fucking Rizzler. It's a joke."
Just to give some credit to the Rizzler, though, I mean, his verse on the song was pretty tough.
I haven't heard it yet. I need to listen to it.
He kind of went in. I'll be honest. His flow. I mean, like, well, hold on. This kid's got a future.
That's what I'm saying. Is maybe it's not such a bad idea to elect. Well, you know, I think Harambe got like 10,000 votes in the 2016 election, so that would have been on par. That would have.
That's about equivalent.
That would have been the one. But even then, it's just like the fact that I had to explain that this was a joke. Yeah. But anyway, sorry. I got lost in the weeds there a little bit. I just had to tell that story because I couldn't believe it. I was like, "There's no way." Maybe I'm too serious whenever I explain this to people. Like, I don't know, because to me it's very obviously a joke because I'm like, every criteria that I list is like, this isn't even a person that's eligible to run. This is not a thing. He's not even doing a campaign. It's nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly though, like I think in the 2016 election, like it did come down pretty close. Like I think, I forget, this was mentioned in class, one of my classes the other day, but someone was saying how one of the elections was down to like a difference of 500 votes in some state, like in Florida or something like that.
Yeah, I think
if it was a difference, then that would have changed the outcome of the election. Which is like, so I think like even though like 10,000 votes for Harambe is like a little bit silly and like insignificant, like it can make the difference. Sure. So I get why people are like, you know, we'll get up in arms about it because it's like, oh, like it's more serious than you think if you don't. I mean, obviously you were not serious because it's the Rizzler. And he's a 14-year-old.
And I don't even know if he might be younger. But I have no idea. But genuinely, I didn't even know like if he's in high school, and I have no idea. But also, it was paired along with this like kind of a condescending like demonization of like third-party voting, which I'm also not really a huge fan of. But
I feel like it's very unconstitutional to say that you should only be voting for the two parties.
Sure, you could certainly make them. I mean, George Washington only warned us about this many moons ago, and here we are.
Listen to him.
But anyway,
two-party system.
To go all the way back to this, would you like to? You don't even have to. Would you like to make an incorrect election prediction on this show? Logan Paul's going to win. That's mine.
Ooh.
Or correct election, even if you think you're right. I mean, you might be wrong. So, I mean, this might just be like a magical aura of this space that just any prediction that gets made turns out to be incorrect.
A lot of consequences to what I say right here.
I know.
I don't know. I think, you know, like old people, generally speaking, are consistent with voting. Like they show about the same. I think, to my knowledge, they show about the same voting outcomes.
Sure.
Every election, and that's the same with like I think generally middle-aged people. Usually young people are, based upon what I've seen, I'm pretty sure it's the case that young people generally have the lowest.
Yeah, young
voting
people
outcomes.
don't usually turn out to vote. I think that's probably going to change this.
With the trend of, you know, I mean, also this election is pretty consequential. I think a lot of people recognize that and care about that. I think that there is there will be a spike in the number of young people that are voting. And
Yeah.
because young people generally vote left, as of right now, I would say it's more likely that Kamala will be elected president.
Okay.
But I'm not overly optimistic about that outcome because I really, it is really hard to tell. So
Yeah.
if I had to put money on it, I'd say Kamala.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's just because again, I think the kind of content and things that Trump voters see versus I'll say people who are going to vote for Kamala Harris, it's interesting because it's I'll see on Twitter sometimes because the whole thing that Elon Musk did on Twitter is that you get about a 50-50 split of right-wing stuff and left-wing stuff. And so, I end up just seeing on my timeline the kind of things that, I guess everyone else is sort of seeing. And the kind of things that I'll see is definitely a difference in the type of things that I'll see people who are, I'll say on the left are are liking and retweeting whatever versus people on the right. It's a stark difference, but it's so interesting how everything that's been happening in the last week or so of the election, I feel like it's just further pushing the people who really support each candidate, more and more concrete to support that. Which I think at that point, if you're in that support of a candidate at this point, you're already going to vote for that person.
Yeah.
But I'm so curious what I would see as far as what the median voter, how their views of the candidates will change in the next week or so. Because I'll see videos where it's I actually haven't watched them, so I'm kind of curious what happens in them exactly. But I'll see videos that are look at Kamala stumble over her thoughts and words in this interview. She has no idea what she's talking about. I'll see that, but then also at the same time, then I'll see videos of Trump speaking at rallies where he's just kind of saying,
yeah, or you'll see this video of two at the Trump rally last week. Whenever there was somebody passed out, and Gurney came in and they were fine, and then another person passed out, same situation. And then he was like, "I think we need to just chill for a minute," and then he danced for 40 minutes straight.
Trump did?
Trump did at a rally. He said,
"Did not hear about this.
Pause. I think we need a little bit of a pause here for a moment." And then he just had someone start playing music, and he just danced.
Maybe I did hear about this actually.
For many minutes, I think it said 40 minutes. He just did like a dance break, and then he just kept going.
I do think more dance breaks are probably a good thing for society, just in everything, political rallies, whatever it may be. I think just a little dance break every now and then.
Him and Biden should have done a dance break.
A dance
during
off.
The debate.
Honestly.
A dance off
yeah. Could you imagine?
So good. I love the AI images of their romance together. All the memes and it's so good. It's so good.
I saw this one clip where it was it was a video of Trump and Biden. They were both at I guess the same event or something like that. But it was after Biden dropped out of the race.
Yes, it was. Was it at the 9/11 memorial or what was it?
Maybe, I don't know.
Where were they?
But it was so funny because you saw their faces when they saw each other and they they're oh, they miss each other. They miss playing Minecraft together. Oh,
they do.
It's so funny.
Anyway, okay. We will now. We're gonna get into some final questions that we like to ask every guest on the show. What advice do you have for young people? I guess you get to give advice to younger people is what I should say, right?
Yeah.
That are trying to get into poli-sci or that want to facilitate civil dialogue or want to really just get involved in stuff.
I'd say this is advice that kind of extends to almost people in general and how they should engage with politics and new ideas and stuff like that. I say this because I'm also vulnerable to this. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but we know less about the world than we think we do. Mm-hmm. I know my experiences. I know how my experiences shaped how I see the world. I have friends who have had different experiences in life. I know, at least to an extent what they'd share with me, how their experiences have affected how they see the world. But just living your life every day with the knowledge and understanding that there's so much that you have to learn, and again I'm speaking for myself as well. I also should be doing that. Mm-hmm. Just recognizing every day that there's so much that you have to learn, and we shouldn't be so quick to assume things about other people, because the reality is it's just not a fair way to live your life. I try to do my best in you have someone that happens a friend or something. I do my best not to assume things about what's going on because I really don't know. So it extends beyond politics, just in general. we should be doing our best to not jump to those conclusions, because it's just not fair to ourselves or the other person. And if we really, I think if we really care about being the best person we can be, then part of that is trying to, I'll say, be as considerate of as many people as we can be. And a part of that is trying to understand people better, and broaden how we view the world. And so I just think that's like just a crucial thing to sort of like that, I speak as some 21-year-old with a poli-sci degree,
Yes.
So,
a
my
liberal 21
Yeah, right.
with a poli-sci degree going to college.
my opinion, isn't super significant. I don't value, I don't see myself as being someone who has a more important opinion, but,
Sure.
than other people. But like, I do really think, in my belief, that's really important that people live their life every day wanting to expand how they view the world, wanting to try to learn from other people. And so, I think people just make an effort every day to try to take a step out of their own shoes and try to see how someone else may experience something different from how they do. And I just think that people will find themselves being a lot more sympathetic to others. And we would just be a better society overall if that was the case.
What is your favorite part of your job? I guess whatever job you would like to pick and choose, whichever one, I guess. Because I'm guessing you like BridgeUSA chapter or whatever else.
Well, yeah, I've held a few jobs in my life, and I would say my favorite part about my jobs is getting to meet and interact with different people. Even like I used to work at my local state rep's office. And from that, my job was, I had various different roles, whatever, but one of the things I did is I would sit at the front desk, and when people would come in with very small town complaints about a stop sign or whatever, I would be the first person they talk to. I would direct them to who they need to talk to about the specific thing. But like even that job, it was cool because I got to, engage with people from my neighborhood where I grew up in a way where I never have before. I got to understand, what do people like care about in this town that I as a teenager don't really care about the same things, obviously. But what do people care about? What do people like? How do different things impact the lives of people who live locally in my neighborhood in a way that's different from how I experience life in my neighborhood? And even just like beyond that, working with Bridge, getting the chance to travel to different states across the country. And meet people from all over the country, and being a student at a university, engaging with people from all over the country, all over the world. Like everything, the thing I appreciate most about all the opportunities that I've had is all the chances that I've been given to talk to and engage with people who grew up differently than I did, and who have had different life experiences. I try to live every day. I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I try to live every day, cognizant of the fact that I don't know what those experiences are like.
Yeah.
And trying to be someone who isn't ignorant of that and is aware of those things. I in my perfect world, I want everyone to feel accepted and loved in society, and to feel like they have a place, no matter where they came from. And so I just really value the opportunities that I've had to learn about people, and just broaden my, as someone who grew up in a small town in PA, I've loved the life that my family has given me, but obviously like anyone else's experience, like I've only gotten to meet so many people and experience so much, so I just want to experience before the day I die. I want to experience everything that I can.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something that I value a lot, in my life, I'd say.
All right. Thank you, Alex Weaver. We appreciate your time. Let's do it again.
I would love to. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Bye, everybody. See you later.
Have a great day.